It was a quiet night in California, sometime in the mid-1970s. A couple slept peacefully in their suburban home, unaware that outside in the shadows, a man was watching them. He had studied their every move. He knew when they would turn off the lights, when they would lock the door, and even when they would let down their guard. In a matter of minutes, terror would invade their lives, and the echoes of his crimes would haunt California for decades. This man would later be known as the Golden State Killer. For more than 40 years, he stalked, raped, and murdered across the state of California. He was a phantom, a shadow, a faceless predator. The police couldn't catch him. Communities lived in fear, and the families of victims were left broken and without justice. But in 2018, after decades of dead ends, a shocking breakthrough finally revealed the face of the monster hiding among ordinary people. This is the story of the Golden State Killer. Long before he became known as the Golden State Killer, the man who would later terrorize California started his crimes in a quiet town called Visalia. In the early 1970s, police began noticing a strange pattern of break-ins. These weren't ordinary burglaries. The intruder didn't just steal valuables. He often stole small personal items like women's underwear, photographs, or sentimental keepsakes. Residents soon gave him a name: the Visalia Ransacker. Broke into more than 100 homes in Visalia, terrifying an entire community. Sometimes he would scatter items around the house, leaving evidence that he had been inside, almost as if he wanted the victims to know they had been watched. In 1975, tragedy struck when a man named Claude Snelling was shot and killed while trying to protect his daughter from being kidnapped by the ransacker. This crime showed a terrifying escalation. Intruder was no longer satisfied with simply breaking in. He was becoming violent, and lives were now at risk. Police tried to catch him, but the ransacker always slipped away. By the mid-1970s, the break-ins in Visalia stopped, but the man behind them hadn't disappeared. He had simply moved to a larger hunting ground. Soon, the Sacramento area would fall into darkness. In the mid-1970s, Sacramento, California, was a growing suburban community. Families felt safe, children played in the streets, and the American dream seemed alive. But behind that calm surface, fear was about to take hold. A new predator was watching, and his crimes would shock the region like nothing before. This was the beginning of the East Area Rapist. The attack started in 1976. At first, the victims were women living alone. The intruder would break into their homes in the dead of night, armed with a flashlight and a weapon. He tied them up, blindfolded them, and brutally assaulted them. He always seemed to know the layout of the house, as if he had been there before. Police soon realized that he had been stalking his victims for days, sometimes weeks, watching their every move. His methods were chilling. He often broke into homes beforehand, unlocking windows or leaving items in strange places. During the attacks, he whispered threats, and sometimes he spoke through clenched teeth to disguise his voice. He created terror that went beyond physical violence. He made his victims feel hunted, powerless, and completely vulnerable. Soon the attacks escalated. Couples were targeted. The intruder would tie up the man and place dishes or cups on his back, warning that if he heard the slightest sound, he would kill them both. Then he would assault the woman, sometimes for hours, while the man lay helpless, unable to move. This sadistic ritual became his signature. The community was gripped by fear. People bought guns, installed locks, and even stopped walking outside after dark. police were overwhelmed with calls. They organized task forces, held community meetings, and even brought in psychological profilers. But despite all efforts, the East Area Rapist continued. Between 1976 and 1979, more than 50 rapes were linked to him in the Sacramento area and beyond. He struck without pattern, hitting one neighborhood and then disappearing, only to resurface somewhere else. He was always one step ahead. By the end of the 1970s, his crimes grew even darker. The assaults turned into murders. What began as break-ins and rapes had now escalated into a full-scale killing spree. California was under siege, and the East Area Rapist was evolving into something even more terrifying. By the late 1970s, the East Area Rapist had shifted his hunting grounds to Southern California. Communities from Santa Barbara to Orange County would soon know his terror. With this move came a chilling escalation. The man who once stalked and assaulted his victims was now killing them. In 1979, a couple named Dr. Robert Offerman and Deborah Manning were found murdered in their home in Santa Barbara County. They had been tied up, just like the rapist's previous victims, but this time he had not left them alive. The brutality of the murders shocked investigators. The precision and methodical nature of the crime made it clear. This was the same predator, and he had become even more dangerous. Over the following years, more couples were killed in similar ways. Sherry Domingo and Gregory Sanchez were murdered in their home. Lyman and Charlene Smith were attacked and killed in Ventura. Keith and Patrice Harrington were slain in their house in Orange County. Time after time, the killer left behind scenes of horror that baffled investigators. What terrified police the most was his consistency. He broke in quietly, often entering through sliding glass doors. He brought with him shoelaces or bindings to tie up his victims. He carried out his assaults with a calm, calculated cruelty, and then he killed, leaving little evidence behind. By the early 1980s, the murders stretched from northern to southern California. Different police departments were investigating, but in those years, communication between counties was slow and limited. Many did not realize they were hunting the same man. Some called him the East Area Rapist. Others labeled him the original Night Stalker. To the public, he was a faceless phantom, striking without warning. As the years passed, the attacks seemed to stop. By 1986, the murders ended, but the damage was already done. Dozens of rapes, at least 13 murders, and countless families destroyed. The trail had gone cold, and the identity of the killer remained a mystery. After the murders stopped, California tried to move on. Families of victims struggled with grief and unanswered questions. Communities remained on edge, never knowing if the Golden State Killer would strike again. Investigators faced a wall. Evidence was limited, witnesses had faded memories, and technology at the time could not reveal the full picture. Police files grew thick with reports, sketches, and witness statements. Task forces formed and disbanded. The case became a cautionary tale of frustration and fear. Despite the lack of arrests, the stories of survivors and victims' families kept the memory of the crimes alive. People spoke in hushed tones about the man who had invaded their homes, violated their lives, and vanished without a trace. News articles chronicled the attacks, and over time, the Golden State Killer became a name whispered across the nation. In the late 2000s, a renewed public interest emerged. True crime books and documentaries recounted the chilling details of the attacks. One journalist, Michelle McNamara, brought attention to the case, coining the phrase Golden State Killer and inspiring thousands to revisit old files. Her work reminded the public and investigators alike that while decades had passed, justice had not been served. In 2018, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source: DNA technology and genetic genealogy. Investigators used distant relatives' DNA on publicly available genealogy websites to narrow down potential suspects. The evidence pointed to a man living quietly in Citrus Heights, California. His name was Joseph James DeAngelo, a former police officer. DeAngelo was arrested in April 2018. The revelation shocked the nation. The man who had terrorized California for decades was living among ordinary people, raising a family, and appearing completely normal to neighbors. Court proceedings revealed the full extent of his crimes: at least 13 murders and more than 50 rapes, along with countless burglaries and home invasions. He pled guilty to multiple counts of murder and sexual assault. Victims and families finally had the justice they had waited for decades to see. DeAngelo was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The court heard stories of his victims' suffering, and survivors shared how the attacks had changed their lives forever. Even after his arrest, the Golden State Killer case continues to influence law enforcement and society. DNA genealogy is now a powerful tool for solving cold cases. Victims' rights and advocacy have grown stronger. Families and communities learn that even decades-old crimes can be brought to light. The story of the Golden State Killer is one of horror, obsession, and terror. But it is also a story of persistence, justice, and the relentless pursuit of truth. It reminds us of the fragility of safety, the resilience of survivors, and the power of modern science to uncover even the darkest secrets. California will never forget the terror he wrought. But after decades, the shadows have lifted, and justice finally has prevailed.